The most dangerous thing in the woods isn't what you can't see. It's who sees you first. The memory of that night is a film strip burned onto the back of my eyelids, playing on a loop whenever I close my eyes. It wasn't the silence of the woods that got to me. It was the specific, deliberate crunch of a footstep on gravel that didn't belong to me. My solo trip was supposed to be a cleanse. A small tent by a glassy lake, a stack of books, and the profound quiet of a forest hours from the nearest town. The first day was perfect, but as dusk bled into night, the atmosphere shifted. The friendly chorus of crickets and frogs fell silent, not gradually, but all at once, as if a switch had been flipped. Into that void came a new sound, the slow, methodical rustling of someone or something moving through the undergrowth just beyond the ring of my firelight. I spent the night rigid in my sleeping bag, a camping knife clutched in my hand, listening to it circle my camp. It never showed itself. At first light, I fled, my hands shaking so badly I could barely collapse my tent. As I threw my gear into the trunk, I saw him. A man, sitting alone in a beat-up sedan parked at the far end of the trailhead lot. He wasn't getting out. He wasn't reading a map. He was just watching. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second across the empty lot, and a cold dread, colder than the morning air, seized my heart. I peeled out, my tires spitting gravel, and in my rearview mirror, I saw him, still watching. He didn't follow. He just sat there, ensuring I knew I had been seen. Weeks later, the memory began to fade, soothed by the familiar noise of the city. Then I saw the news article. Hiker found dead in woods. The location was my lake. The details were sparse, chilling. No signs of a struggle. No cause of death determined. Just a body, alone near an abandoned campsite. The rational part of my brain screamed coincidence. The primal part knew the truth. The man in the car wasn't just a weirdo. He was a hunter, and I had been his quarry who got away. The article didn't mention a car in the lot. It didn't have to. I knew. That's when the real terror began. The subtle violations started. I'd come home from work to find my back door unlocked, a door I knew I had deadbolted. A favorite coffee mug would be on the wrong shelf. A picture frame on my desk was tilted at a slight angle. I was being gaslit by a ghost. Then came the note, a single piece of cheap lined paper taped to my front door one Tuesday morning. The word was scrawled in a messy, hurried hand, the pen nearly tearing through the paper. Soon, the police were polite, professional, and utterly useless. No fingerprints. The security camera I installed faced the street and captured nothing but a blurry figure in a hoodie, head deliberately down, slipping through my side gate from the alley. Now, I live in a prison of my own making. Every creak of the house is his footstep. Every car that idles too long outside is him watching. I don't sleep, I listen, I wait. The fear from the woods didn't stay there. It followed me home, a shadow given form. It's in the misplaced items, the unlocked door, the single word on a piece of paper. He's reminding me that our story isn't over. The hunt was interrupted, and soon, he's coming to finish it. In the wild, you're never the top of the food chain. The cold was what woke me first, a deep, penetrating chill that my cheap sleeping bag was never meant to handle. Then came the silence. The forest had gone utterly, profoundly mute. No wind, no insects, no distant hoot of an owl. It was a silence so heavy, it felt like a physical pressure on my tent. I fumbled for my flashlight, my breath misting in the beam. That's when I heard it. A low, guttural crunching of leaves, slow and deliberate, just outside the thin nylon wall. This was no raccoon. The weight of the steps was all wrong, too heavy, too purposeful. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I lay frozen, the beam of my light shaking as I pointed it toward the sound. The crunching stopped right beside my head. I could hear slow rhythmic breathing, a soft snuffling sound as it tested the air. It knew I was in here. Terror is a curious thing. It can paralyze you, or it can lend you a strength you never knew you had. I slowly, silently, unzipped the tent flap just an inch and pointed my light out into the darkness. 2 points of emerald fire glared back at me. They were low to the ground, about 30 feet away, floating in the blackness. They didn't blink. They just held my gaze, intelligent and utterly predatory. A wolf. A big one. I could just make out the massive, shadowy shape of its body, its hackles raised into a ridge along its back. I didn't scream. I didn't move. We were locked in a silent standoff, the human and the wolf, separated by a flimsy sheet of nylon and 100,000 years of evolution. I knew running was a death sentence. Playing dead was an invitation. Slowly, ever so slowly, I reached for the pile of rocks I'd gathered for the firing. My movement was agonizingly slow. The wolf's eyes tracked me. I clutched a stone in my sweaty palm. With a sudden burst of motion, I lunged out of the tent, hurling the rock toward it and unleashing a raw, primal scream that tore from my throat. "Get out! Go on, get!" The wolf flinched, startled by the sudden aggression. It took a single step back, then another. It didn't run. It simply melted backward into the trees, those glowing eyes never leaving me until the darkness swallowed it whole. I didn't sleep another second. I sat with my back to a tree, a large branch in my hand, staring into the void until the sun finally, blessedly, began to rise. In the gray morning light, I packed my gear with frantic speed. And that's when I saw them. Pressed deep into the soft earth around my tent was a single set of massive, unmistakable paw prints. They had circled my tent all night long. A slow, patient reconnaissance. I've never hiked out of a forest faster. The relief when I locked my car doors was so potent it made me dizzy. But the memory of those eyes won't leave me. It wasn't the mindless aggression of a startled animal. It was a calculated assessment, a test. And sometimes, in the deepest part of the night, I wake up, convinced I can hear the soft crunch of leaves in my own backyard. And I wonder if the test is over, or if it was only the beginning. The most terrifying sound isn't a howl in the distance. It's the slow, deliberate opening of your only protection. We were 3 friends, laughing too loud, feeling invincible, surrounded by the quiet of the pines. The fire was dying, embers casting a faint orange glow on our faces. The stories had been told, the marshmallows eaten. The woods felt like our own private kingdom. I fell asleep to the sound of my friends breathing from the neighboring tents, a comforting sound. I don't know what woke me. A change in pressure, a cessation of sound. The forest was holding its breath. Then I heard it. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Heavy, deliberate footsteps on the bed of pine needles. Too heavy for a deer, too bipedal for a bear. They circled our campsite once, then twice. A slow, predatory orbit. My blood turned to ice. I lay frozen, listening to my friends' oblivious, steady breathing. Why weren't they hearing this? The footsteps stopped. Right outside my tent, I could hear breathing now. Ragged, wet, The sound of someone or something exerting itself. The silhouette of a man blotted out the faint moonlight on my tent wall. He was just standing there. Then came the sound I will hear on my deathbed. The soft metallic zip of my tent zipper being pulled down. An inch, then two, painfully slow. A nightmare in slow motion. Panic dissolved my paralysis. I scrambled for the knife I kept in my boot, my heart a jackhammer against my ribs. The zipper reached the bottom. The tent flap was open. A dark shape filled the opening, smelling of damp earth and stale sweat. I didn't think. I acted on pure animal instinct. I lunged forward and slashed wildly with the knife. I felt the blade meet resistance, bite into something solid. A grunt of pain and surprise, more animal than human, erupted from the figure. He recoiled, clutching his arm. In the sliver of moonlight, I saw his face. Wild, unkempt, contorted in a snarl of pain and fury. His eyes were black pits of madness. I didn't wait. I scrambled out the back of my tent, tearing through the nylon in my desperation to escape. I didn't scream for my friends. I just ran. I ran blind through the pitch-black forest, branches whipping my face, thorns tearing at my clothes, the sound of his enraged roar echoing behind me. I didn't stop until I found a park ranger's truck at dawn, babbling and bleeding. They went back to the site. My friends were shaken, but unharmed, woken by the commotion. My tent was shredded. My belongings were scattered, and there, on the forest floor, was a dark, drying stain of blood. They never found him. The official report called it an attempted assault by an unknown individual. A random, terrible event. But I know it wasn't random. The way he walked directly to my tent. The patience of that zipper. He was watching us long before we went to sleep. He was choosing. And I have to live with the chilling knowledge that I was the one he picked. The city is no sanctuary now. Every crowded street feels like a hunting ground. Every night, I check my locks a dozen times. And I still sleep with a knife under my pillow. Because I know that out there, in the dark, a pair of furious, maddened eyes hasn't forgotten the one that got away. Of course, my apologies for the oversight. Here are the remaining 4 stories completed in the same detailed, suspenseful style. Some places don't like to be found, and some things that live there don't like visitors. The cabin was a postcard of isolation, and that's exactly what I'd wanted. No Wi-Fi, no cell service, just the whisper of pines and the placid, mirror-like surface of the lake. For 3 days, it was perfect. On the 4th night, the feeling shifted. It was a subtle thing at first. A prickle on the back of my neck while I was reading on the porch. A sense that the surrounding forest was no longer just scenery, but an audience. Then came the sounds. Not the harmless scuttling of raccoons, but the distinct, heavy crunch of a footfall on the opposite shore. I'd snap my head up, my book forgotten, and scan the tree line. Nothing. Just the deepening shadows of twilight. I told myself it was a deer. But deer don't walk in 2-legged steady steps. The next morning, I went down to the water's edge to skip stones, and I saw them. Footprints. Large, barefoot human footprints pressed into the soft mud. They emerged from the lake and led back into it. A cold dread, separate from the morning chill, washed over me. Who swims at night? Who walks barefoot in these rocky woods? That night, I barred the door with a chair and kept the fire blazing high. The sounds came earlier. This time, they weren't on the opposite shore. They were on my side of the lake. Crunch, crunch, crunch. moving along the perimeter of the clearing, just beyond the firelight's reach. I could hear wet, ragged breathing now, punctuating the footsteps. I grabbed my flashlight, my hand trembling so violently the beam danced across the trees. "Who's out there?" I yelled, my voice cracking with a fear I couldn't conceal. The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was heavier, more menacing than the noise had been. Then a figure stepped into the very edge of the light. It was a man, or something that had once been a man. He was emaciated, pale skin stretched taut over bone, dripping with lag water that looked black in the firelight. His hair was long and matted, plastered to his face. But his eyes, they were wide, impossibly wide, and utterly vacant. He didn't speak. He didn't snarl. He just stared with a hollow, ancient hunger that froze the very air in my lungs. He took a step forward. I didn't think. I acted. I threw the entire stack of firewood onto the fire. It roared to life. A sudden brilliant inferno that shot sparks into the sky and pushed the darkness back 20 feet. The figure flinched from the light, raising a skeletal arm to shield its face. It let out a sound then, a low, guttural hiss of pure frustration before turning and melting back into the trees. I didn't sleep. I sat with my back to the fire, watching the tree line until the sun rose. At first light, I ran. I left everything, my food, my books, my expensive sleeping bag, and fled to my car. I didn't stop driving until I saw the first gas station. I told the grizzled old attendant, my words tumbling out in a frantic jumble. He listened patiently, then nodded slowly. "The lake, man," he said as if discussing the weather. "Folks round here know better than to camp on that lake. He don't like company, pulls people under. Sometimes he lets them go. Mostly he don't. I never went back. But the city's no escape. Every time I take a bath, I see his pale, waterlogged face in my mind. Every dark puddle on the pavement seems too deep. I'm forever listening for the sound of dripping water when there is none. He wasn't just a man. He was the spirit of that deep, dark water. And I have the terrifying feeling that by looking into his hollow eyes, I didn't just see him. He saw me. And a thing that loves the water can always follow the rain. The most dangerous thing to lose in the woods isn't your way. It's your sense of what's real. I've always had a good sense of direction. It was a point of pride. So when I took the left fork on the mountain trail, ignoring the faint prickle of doubt, I was confident. The map on my phone was fuzzy, but the path seemed clear enough. At first, the change was gradual. The well-trodden dirt path became a rocky goat track. The friendly, sun-dappled forest gave way to a denser, darker wood where the trees grew close and twisted. The sounds of other hikers vanished, replaced by a watchful, oppressive silence. My phone's GPS flickered and died. The no-service symbol a mocking epitaph on my screen. Panic is a quiet thief. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just whispers, cold and steady in your ear. You're lost. The sun, my only reliable guide, was now hidden by a thick canopy that seemed to be closing in on me. Shadows lengthened, morphing into grasping shapes. Every rustle in the undergrowth was a predator. Every snap of a twig was a footstep behind me. I started to run. It was a stupid, panicked decision. I tripped on a root, tearing my pants and skinning my knee. The pain was sharp and clarifying. I was alone, lost, and night was coming. I found a small clearing and did the only thing I could. I built a pitifully small fire with damp wood and huddled next to it, my large knife held tightly in my hand. The night was endless. The forest was no longer just silent. It was listening. I heard things. Whispers that weren't quite words carried on the wind. A low humming that seemed to come from the trees themselves. I saw movements in the periphery of my vision. Swift, shadowy flits between the trunks that stopped the moment I turned my head. I was no longer just lost. I was trespassing. Dawn broke, gray and weak. I was exhausted, cold, and utterly terrified. I stumbled downhill, my only thought to find moving water, a road, anything. When I finally broke through the tree line and onto a wide, familiar trail, I nearly wept with relief. A group of day hikers looked at me with alarm. I was muddy, bleeding, and wild-eyed. Back home, the relief was short-lived. The fear had followed me out of the woods. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, convinced I was back in that clearing. The smell of damp leaves would trigger a panic attack. Weeks later, I was cleaning my backpack, trying to reclaim some sense of normalcy, when I found it. Caked in dried mud on the bottom of the pack was a single small footprint. It was narrow, with long, distinct toes. It was not my boot print. It was not a print I could identify. The chill that went through me was absolute. I hadn't been alone. Those whispers, those movements in the dark, they weren't my imagination. Something had been with me in that clearing. It had been close enough to touch my back. It had been watching me the entire time. And the most terrifying question of all, did I accidentally walk onto its path, or did it lead me there? Curiosity didn't just kill the cat. It invited something else inside. The rustling in the bush was persistent. Louder than a squirrel, clumsier than a bird. My flashlight beam cut through the inky blackness of the campsite, but the dense thicket swallowed the light whole. I'd been lying in my tent for an hour, trying to ignore it, but the sound was getting closer, more deliberate. Probably just a possum, I muttered to myself. The sound of my own voice, a small comfort against the vast silence of the woods, but possums are skittish. This thing wasn't. It kept rustling, a relentless, scraping, shuffling sound that was starting to feel intentional. Annoyance began to override fear. I was tired. I needed sleep. I grabbed my heavy maglite, more a club than a light, and unzipped the tent. "Hey!" I yelled into the darkness, my voice sharper than I intended. "Get out of here." The rustling stopped instantly. The silence that followed was somehow worse. It was a listening silence. I took a few steps toward the bush, my heart starting to hammer again. I poked the beam of light into the foliage. Nothing. I was about to turn back, feeling foolish, when I saw it. A shape, partially hidden behind the thickest part of the bush, low to the ground. It wasn't an animal shape. It was wrong. It seemed hunched, wrapped in shadows that the light couldn't penetrate. And then I saw the eye. A single, large, dark eye, reflecting the light back at me with a faint, wet shine. It wasn't blinking. It just stared from the depths of the bush. My breath caught in my throat. Every hair on my body stood on end. This was no animal. The eye held an intelligence, a cold, alien curiosity that froze me in place. I couldn't see a body, a face, just that one, unblinking eye observing me from the dark. A low sound began to emanate from the bush. It wasn't a growl. It was a hum, a deep, vibrational buzz that seemed to resonate in my bones, setting my teeth on edge. The eye remained fixed on me. I stumbled backward, my courage shattering. I fell into my tent, yanking the zipper shut so fast I nearly broke it. I sat there in the dark, trembling, listening. The humming continued for a few more minutes, a sinister lullaby, and then it stopped. The rustling did not return. I didn't sleep. At first light, I emerged, terrified but desperate to see. The bush looked ordinary, but there, in the soft dirt in front of it, was a series of deep, strange impressions. They weren't tracks, they were depressions, as if something heavy and multi-limbed had settled there for a long time, watching my tent. I packed and left faster than I ever have. The rational part of my mind has tried to explain it away. A trick of the light, a confused owl. But I know what I saw. That intelligent, staring eye wasn't from this world. I didn't just camp in the woods that night. I camped in something's territory. And I have the gut-wrenching feeling that by shining my light on it, by meeting its gaze, I didn't scare it away. I got its attention. And something that curious doesn't just forget. You can run from the monster, but you can't outrun the fear that it was never alone. The feeling of being watched was a physical weight on my back as I ran. Branches tore at my clothes like grasping fingers. I didn't dare look back. I could still hear him behind me, crashing through the undergrowth, his enraged grunts echoing in the silent forest. My lungs burned. My side ached with a sharp stitch. The image of his wild, furious eyes was seared into my mind. I'd fought him off. I'd escaped my torn tent and run for my life, but he was still coming. I burst out of the tree line onto the dirt road where my car was parked, sobbing with relief. I fumbled for my keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably, and threw myself into the driver's seat, locking the doors with a satisfying thunk. That's when I allowed myself to look back. He stood at the edge of the woods, chest heaving, clutching the arm I'd slashed with my knife. He wasn't chasing anymore. He was just watching me, his head tilted. And then he did the strangest thing. He smiled. It wasn't a smile of anger or frustration. It was a smile of satisfaction. A new, deeper chill iced my veins. Why was he smiling? I had gotten away. I started the car and sped down the winding mountain road, my eyes glued to the rearview mirror. He was gone. But the smile haunted me. It made no sense. It wasn't until days later, safe in my apartment, but jumping at every sound, that the memory surfaced. A detail my mind had buried in the sheer terror of the moment. While I was running, just after I'd torn through my tent, I'd heard something else. Another set of footsteps. Not in front of me, not behind me with the man. To my left. They had been lighter, faster, keeping pace with me through the trees. I'd written it off as an echo, the blood roaring in my ears. But now, with the clarity of hindsight, I knew. They were different. They were separate. He wasn't smiling because I got away. He was smiling because I had run exactly where I was supposed to. The crashing pursuit behind me wasn't the real threat. It was the herding. The thing running silently beside me in the dark. The thing I never saw. That was the real danger. I didn't escape the woods that night. I was released. And the smile was a promise. A promise that the next time, the herding wouldn't be necessary. The next time, they wouldn't let me see them coming. The fear is no longer of the man I saw. It's of the one I didn't. The one who's still out there, patient and silent, waiting for his turn.